Welcome back, everybody, to the Intelligent Human Leadership Podcast. I am grateful for you to be with me one more time this week as we're heading in quickly to the end of January as I'm recording this podcast episode. And I thought it would be helpful, impactful, as I aim to equip you every week here to talk about the idea of the power of influence in our leadership journey. I will be traveling here in Southern California to Visalia to the Western Wildlife Section annual meeting next week. And it caused me to think a little bit about people in their career and how they often focus on titles, positions, possibly, which doesn't always equate to influence. It can, but it doesn't necessarily. And I want to stress that leadership isn't about titles, it really is about influence. Whether you're at business, whether you're at a conference, just in everyday interactions, true leadership is measured by the impact that we have on people, not merely the position. You know, we see that just because we have a new president of the United States, whether you like him or not, doesn't necessarily mean he's going to have the impact that he would purely on the position. Um, and so I'm going to explore here at a two-part podcast episode that we move beyond these job titles and bring this two-part series to you that we can build authentic influence and really maximize our networking and learning experiences, especially when you go to conferences and maybe you're in this season, if you haven't already, or where you're going in. Typically, in my background in environmental consulting for 20 plus years, February is a very busy month, typically for conferences and networking professional events. I'll be one here at the end of the month as well, traveling to Las Vegas for the Desert Tortoise annual symposium. And I'll talk more about that one later on this month in February, I should say. But I want to challenge you here, as I do each week, and really try to put a framework for you to consider in looking at things you might not have considered or looked at previously about influence versus authority and leading beyond our title. That's going to be the focus of this episode's podcast. So I want you to lean in, get a favorite beverage or coffee or whatever that might be for you as we take a few minutes here today to really look at how do we have meaningful influence versus just pure authority or position. um, Titles don't define leadership. They certainly recognize that you've positioned yourself, you've gotten some accolades, you've achieved something, but it really is influence is about how you show up as a leader. And this is something that is going to be ongoing for you. Oftentimes people get in a position, and rightly so, they've gotten in and moved and then they've gotten into a place of authority, possibly, and they've let that influence wane, and they've really leaned in the authority. Um, and there's times where we can often lead with great influence and have little authority. Um, think about people in your life that may not have had an authoritative presence, yet the influence they had. For me, as a child, a young age, I had grandparents, and while their friends weren't in an authoritative position, I was blessed and very fortunate to have such wonderful influence from them of caring and leading and mentoring and guiding and sharing in me as a young man that really made a difference, and it's helped me have such an appreciation for those that don't don't have that. I've been very grateful for that, and I've seen other people along the journey through community, um, through nonprofits that I've been a part of, that while they may not have the greatest authority, the influence to be able to speak into my life has been very important. I've invited people into my life not from an authoritative place, but because of they have great influence, because of their wisdom, because of their experience, the life experience, um, and through counseling, through coaching, um, I've invited people in because again, there's no formal authority here, but it's more about I value their influence, I value their input in their life, and so I want you to encourage you here on this episode to evaluate and understand where does influence come from, and how can we develop it. Because sometimes we confuse authority with influence. And here on today's episode, we're going to get into a little bit more on the influence side. Influence being built on kind of three core characteristics, but one of them is character. And a common way of embracing character is what do you do or who are you when nobody else is looking? That's your character. And is your character wavering, or is your character subject to the whims of who you're around or the environment, or is this steady, is this consistent? Because the more that you're steady and consistent, you're not more likely, you will have greater influence on others. If your character is up and down and all around and unreliable, well, your influence is going to diminish. Now, you can try to enforce certain things, but when we see this in people of places of authority and they're inconsistent, unfortunately, we see this in government agencies, police. We look at this where when we see inconsistencies and you see the authority coming in, the influence is minimized. What we want to do is raise the influence to go along with the authority so that it's respected and authority is appreciated because it's led with the influence. You have competence. And I've talked about this in previous episodes of in the influence model. But this specific episode, I want to distinguish particularly between influence and authority. And competence is big because competence is about your expertise and your ability to serve others. Why do I come and do this podcast with you every week? I want to build influence and understanding, meaning, you see, you taste, you hear David Carr, you hear Steward Your Business, you know what we're about, you know my passion, you know that I'm here fighting for your highest good, and that you're going to have an advocate for you. Um, you're not just somebody here just hitting you up on LinkedIn or sending you an email about trying to sell you something. You're like, you don't even know me. How do I even know your track record? Who are you? How are you showing up? What's that all about? Well, competency is huge. Uh, we have to be able to show and demonstrate our expertise and our understanding and our ability to serve others. That's huge. All have the capacity in us at some form, but are we actually doing it? Are we actually serving others? Um, and can they see it? Can they feel it? Can they speak to it? And connection. How do we build relationships? How do we add value? Now, I'm a connector by nature. For those of you that have taken the Five Voices assessment, and if you haven't, well, come join me on one of my boot camps that I'll be doing this year. Love to have you. But the Five Voices is just a framework of understanding what's our key or our leading voice. And for me, it's connector. It really is building the relationship. And when we do this, leaders at every level can develop influence by focusing on just these three pillars: your character, your competence, and your connection. Think about those three things. The three-legged stool analogy, right? If one of those is missing, you're going to have a difficult time having really lasting influence. And you might lean on authority, try and force it or manipulate it, unfortunately, or passively aggressive, evenly, trying to get people to do what you want them to do. So how does this show up? Influence. I'm going to give you a specific example here for you in the space of networking or learning environments. Like I mentioned to you at the beginning of the podcast, I'm going to be traveling to an annual meeting. I've been a part of the Wildlife Society for a long time, and I found just tremendous people that are very passionate about conservation, wildlife, nature, outdoors. Something that's always been in my life since I was a young boy, and I now serve with Steward Your Business, coming alongside those businesses and leaders to help them be more adept and have greater influence in leading their teams. So, how can we look at this? The mistake is, think about this. The mistake is, do you lead with your title instead of relationship? Oftentimes we want to talk about I'm the principal, I'm the senior, I'm the director, I'm the VP of whatever, right? Now, those titles do serve a purpose. Don't get me wrong. I think they are important. However, don't mistake that to take over what you really need to be doing in building relationship and connection with another person. The most memorable and respected people in the room don't necessarily always have esteemed titles, but if they're able to engage and listen and contribute value, then the title isn't as important. Like, this person makes me feel good. They understand where I'm coming from. They bring value, insights, right? They listen, they pay attention. The Wildlife Society has this great app that I like called the Hoover app, for example. And I spent time this afternoon just diving into the app, providing value, responding, asking questions, being clear. Uh, the purpose for me in doing that isn't to puff me up. It's more like, hey, Dave is a resource. He's looking and seeing like this might be something that's helpful for me. Um, and so I want to jump right in there and say, hey, look, I'm a person that wants to help. I'm a person that wants to give, and the influence I have is coming from a place of abundance that I want to share with other attendees there, because I know what it's like to be on the other side. I've been going to a work networking work or an event. How many of you have gone to a networking event and you feel isolated, alone? You don't know how to connect with other people. You don't know how to demonstrate um, your competency, perhaps. Uh, and nobody knows your character because you might be new. They don't know your background. They don't know enough about you. So, one thing you can do to build influence is start on the connection side. And one of the things I said even in that app was, I said, get out of your comfort zone, because everybody's uncomfortable at some level. Even if you're a connector like me, there's still new people. There's lots of new people I don't know. Um, but I want to empower you to look about how we can step it up in building our influence. And you don't have authority in many cases. Now, maybe some of you do going to an event like this, but look at the right way and the wrong way of introducing yourself. I'm going to give you some actionable takeaways here to help expand your influence. And I'm going to give you some here that you can apply today, whether you're at a big conference or simply just talking to some other folks in the office where you're at, or even online, candidly, because oftentimes we're in a distributed workforce. We're not all coming together, but you can engage in a bulletin board or a chat group where there's ways that we can do this. So I want you to lead with curiosity, not credentials. Ask better questions. Don't lean on the here's my all the things that I've done. There's competency in there, don't get me wrong, but people are more interested in talking about themselves, sharing about themselves. Be curious. Listen. You're going to have greater influence as you take note of these things. I'm in a networking group. I meet once a week. Um, and if those of you that want to find out more, Success Champions Network, I'm happy to share more about that. But one of the things we do every week is we're listening to each other, and we're hearing where you're at, who are you looking to connect with, what do you do, what's your unique value proposition. I'm listening and taking all this in because I want to know, okay, how can I, number one, help this person? Number two, clearly in helping them represent, share, introduce, refer them to somebody else, because I would want them to do the same for me. The golden rule, do unto others as they would be done unto you, right? And so let's engage with others in value-based conversations rather than self-promotion. Start there first. Build relationship over opportunity. You can check a previous podcast episode where I've dived into that specific topic, just that alone. But find opportunities to facilitate rather than dominate discussion. Be a person ready with questions, be probing, finding out what they're at. And because as they know you care and show genuine interest, I'm not just listening and to just wait my turn to talk. I'm generally trying to understand and figure out where you're at so that way I can help you. You can set an intention how you show up at a networking event such as this Wildlife Society event that I'm going to be going to next week. Set the intention and don't be intimidated or fearful or doubt or worry like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to handle this. Find yourself a connector like myself. I'm actually going to be going with a couple colleagues, clients, helping them in this area, coaching them in this because it doesn't come natural to everybody. I get it. Some of these things are more natural to others, and we can help you not self sabotage, not hurt your influence, not you know somebody thinking you're rude or cold or put off, but rather realizing, no, this person has a lot of value and I want to get to know them better. Um, when we do that, when we set that intention, we're going to have greater influence. And so this episode is really about looking at yourself and how are you building the influence? Are you leading with a title? Are you trying to be authoritative in getting out your message? And perhaps maybe rethink that because you're maybe not getting the response that you would have otherwise. When we challenge ourselves, maybe at your next networking event, focus on making at least one real connection without even mentioning your title. Yeah, try that. See how that plays out for you. Can you listen and take in and ask questions of the other person? Um, what we're going to be doing in the upcoming episode is talking more about how do we sustain and grow that influence over the long term. There's some really key things that we can do to keep nurturing that. But I wanted to come to you today here on the podcast to really have you consider how you're showing up and whether it's at work or at home. I'm a husband, father. If I try to use those titles as husband and father as an authoritative model versus using influence works better all the time. All the time. If I try to say, well, I'm your father or I'm your husband or whatever and you should listen to me because that's the title and that, I'm in this position. Um, it's not generally going to work out very well for you. But if you learn to lead with influence, with character, competence, really dealing with connection, drilling into that, people know that you really care, that you're really for them. Your influence is going to multiply and they're going to refer other people to you. You're going to have more relationships, deeper relationships, better relationships than you have ever had. Don't look for the quick fix. Don't look for the I just want to throw this out there. I want to be flashy and say this. But realizing that titles are fleeting, they move around. You may move from one title to another. Oftentimes, titles that are given, especially internally, don't mean a whole lot to other people externally. They don't know what that means exactly. They have a vague idea. And so lead with being curious, understanding where they're coming from. You're going to have greater influence. So as you go into these events, I want to encourage you make an effort to really connect with at least one person, perhaps more, but start with just one that you really said you walk away and you said, you know what, I really feel like I have a lasting influence. Could I call this person up? Could I have this? Would they remember me? Or was I memorable? Right? Because think back and those people that had the greatest influence of your life, they probably were not authoritarian in their nature or their role. They're probably people that genuinely cared, and you're like, man, I really appreciated this friend, this neighbor, this coworker, and the way they cared for me. They came alongside. And that way you can be that most intelligent human leader. We need you. We need you. We need your expertise, we need your kindness, we need your engagement. Yes, we've got technology. Yes, we've got all these tools, but here on the podcast, it's empowering you to be that most intelligent human leader and come alongside and join us. If this is resonating with you and you're hearing it, join us. Come here, reach out with me. I'm happy to have a conversation and see if the tools and the resources I have here through Steward Your Business are going to serve you and your company or group that you're a part of. And hopefully, I will see you at one of these networking events. We'll have the opportunity to positively influence each other together. And until then, come back for our next episode where I will pick up expanding your influence through connection and service. We'll dive into that in the next episode. Thanks so much for listening. Take care, everybody.